And that's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday. It is the most important day of the week and the most fun day of the week because it's the day that the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show. I'm Jim Lakely, Vice President of the Heartland Institute. There is nothing else quite like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere. So I hope you will like, share, and subscribe and leave your comments underneath this video. These all convince YouTube's algorithm, and that on Rumble as well, to smile upon this program, to get the show in front of even more people. And my weekly reminder that big tech and the legacy media do not approve of the way that we cover climate and energy on this program. So Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you want to support this program, and I surely hope you do, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. That stands for the Climate Realism Show. And you can help make sure that this program happens every single week. Any support you can give us is greatly appreciated. So with that, and of course, we also want to thank our streaming partners who help us get this show in front of more eyes. That is junkscience.com, CFACT, and What's Up With That. You should check out all of their websites every week. It is full of fantastic climate realism information, the kind of stuff you get here on this program. So today we have our usual crew. We have with us Anthony Watts. He's a senior fellow at the Heartland Institute and the publisher of the most influential climate website in the world, What's Up With That. We have H. Sterling Burnett, director of the Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute, and Linnea Lueken, research fellow for energy and environment policy at Heartland. Greetings, everybody.
Howdy, howdy.
Hello.
So before we get started with our rundown from the show notes for the program today, obviously Hurricane Helene made landfall within the last 24 hours, and its remnants are already in the middle of the country, basically dominating the weather in the right half of the country as you're looking at the map. In fact, it's quite breezy today in northern Illinois, as the storm, I believe, is somewhere around the center of the storm, or what used to be the storm, is around eastern Tennessee and western North Carolina at the moment. Linnea, you were in South Carolina, and you shared with us on our internal Heartland Slack that you got a bit of a wallop from it, a wallop that you weren't expecting over there in South Carolina.
Yeah, I really did not think it was going to come and reach and grab me while over here in the low country. I was up all night, so if I look a little haggard today, that would be why. My phone was going off constantly for tornado warnings and stuff, and so my dog and I slept in the bathroom for most of the night. So that was fun.
Did you get any pictures of the front yard? You said it was trashed.
Yeah, well, the front yard actually is totally clean. It's my backyard that's full of small branches mostly. I have a couple of big limbs down from trees, but luckily they didn't hit anything. They just kind of crashed down into the middle of the yard. So that's fun.
Are there chicken feathers everywhere?
No, the chickens are beside themselves at the branches all over the place in the yard. They have not shut up all morning. They're literally crowing about it. So
Yes, there you go.
But 2 of them slept outside overnight because sometimes they don't get inside in time. So 2 of them were out in the run overnight, and I'm surprised actually that they didn't blow away. So it was very, very violent last night. I was very surprised, but thank goodness we didn't get it nearly as bad as Florida did, obviously. Right. So, prayers for those people who, are still getting kind of pulled out of the wreckage there. Although it seems like the hurricane, similar to, what was it, Idalia, that kind of hit that Bend region where there's a lot of nature preserves, dead on, and not a whole lot of, homes and stuff. But this storm was massive, so it's definitely not a good one.
It evidently had a bigger impact, not impact, but as far as deaths, it looks like Georgia was very hard hit.
Yeah, Atlanta's flooding a lot.
Yeah, I saw on Twitter just before we came up live on the air that, or I should say X, that a Fox weather reporter in Georgia was live on the air, and he heard a woman screaming for help from her car, which was being flooded, and she could have drowned. And he ran over there and saved her, and they got it on camera of her carrying her to safety. It's quite amazing.
Well, I've heard 20 people dead, most of them in Georgia, including one emergency worker who was out.
Wow. That's tragic, but these storms do happen, and I almost hate to mention this because we have a full show, but it was inevitable, right? That I just looked up climate change and Hurricane Helene, and there it is. Stories from this morning. Here's one from Bloomberg, that talks about hurricanes and how human activity is making them worse and worse and worse. So I think we should address that. We addressed that a lot on this show, and we should address it here when it's very, very timely. There was a story from Bloomberg, and there were several of them across media. The headline was, Hurricane Helene has a blunt message for Climate Week. The storm is a stark reminder of the damage global warming is causing already and the need for urgent action. They say that the author here is an opinion piece, says that climate change didn't necessarily cause Helene. Well, that's nice. And it's not unprecedented for storms to move far inland, but when hurricanes do form, high temperatures can supercharge them. It's a reminder of how much excess heat is already in the system. 1.3 degrees Celsius of warming above pre-industrial averages, by one estimate, has been enough to intensify hurricanes, ramp up floods, droughts, wildfires, and heat waves across the planet. Letting that rise to 3 degrees Celsius, the path our civilization is currently on, will increase these destructive repercussions exponentially. Anthony, you are our resident meteorologist on the Climate Realism Show. I wonder if you might be able to get us started on countering the latest of the endless alarmist narrative when it comes to hurricanes.
Well, first of all, I want to point out that we knew this was going to happen. In fact, the Babylon Bee nailed it earlier in the week with a graphic that they put out. And it was hilarious. If we can see that, Andy, that graphic from the Babylon Bee summed up what everybody who's on the climate realism side of the world thought about this upcoming week. Experts warn hurricane and Hurricane Alley during hurricane season is a clear sign of climate change, right? And so, of course, Bloomberg, they nailed it. They got it down exactly right. But the problem is that, it's almost a meme now that the media will say hurricanes are getting worse from climate change. Tornadoes are getting worse from climate change. Dust storms are getting worse from climate change. Whatever it is, they will go to and say it's getting worse from climate change. Well, that's a giant load of codswallop, seriously, because if you go and look at the data, it doesn't support it. First of all, let's look at what we have on our website at climateataglance.com about hurricanes. And at Climate at a Glance, we have documented that there's been no increase in extreme hurricanes. There's a graph further down, right there. There it is. There it was. That graph right there sums it all up. Global tropical cyclone frequency. It's flat. There is no exponential increase, as Bloomberg claims. And this is the accumulated cyclone energy. So they're not getting stronger either. Both the frequency and the strength is flat. And so it's just not there. But the other most important thing that shoots down stories like Bloomberg is a table from the IPCC. Now, this table from the IPCC in their AR6 talks about the fact that they cannot find any signal whatsoever for tropical cyclones currently, nor is there projected to be any in the future up to 2050 or 2100. So,
and Anthony, that's it. What's important about the latter statement is that that's under the most extreme, impossible climate scenario, 8.5.
Right. Yeah, the 8.5, the super hot, doom generator model doesn't show it either. So the point is that this is something that exists. This claim of hurricanes are getting worse due to climate change exists only within the media and climate activists like Michael Mann, who said that there was going to be 33 hurricanes this year, 33 named storms. Well, so far, it's not looking good for Mr. Mann, or Dr. Mann, as you will. But we'll see. And we'll have a lot of fun knocking down those predictions at the end of the hurricane season.
All right. Well, thank you, Anthony, very much for for that explanation. I think it's very timely and very good and very excellent. And again, you can go to climateataglance.com whenever something like this is happening. If it's a tornado season, if it's polar vortex season, if all the extreme weather events that the mass media likes to attribute is getting worse all the time because we like to drive SUVs and have gas stoves and all that stuff. Climateataglance.com is where you can go to get the information you need for yourself and for your family and your friends, and heck, maybe even a letter to the editor to debunk all of that stuff in real time. Very easy for the layman like me to understand.
You know what it reminds me of? It's sort of like the gun issue, right? Every time a shooting happens, well, it's guns. It's guns. If we only did something with guns, they politicize every tragedy for political gain. And that is, following Rahm Emanuel's playbook that he laid out for Democrats a long time ago, which was never let a crisis go to waste.
Yep. And they don't. They never let it go to waste. No. Okay. And before we came on the air, Anthony Watts says, "Too bad Climate Week wasn't in Florida this year." We wouldn't wish that upon anybody, but maybe it's a little harder to protest when water's up to your knees in the middle of the street. So who knows? All right. Let's go on to our favorite segment of this program, and that is the crazy climate news of the week. Hit the drop, Andy. That's great.
Bill Nye, the psycho guy.
That's right. Actually, we are going to go. I just realized I forgot to drop the video in. That's important for our first item. So we're going to go to the second one. And while you guys talk, I'm going to grab that video and we'll go to the third one. So anyway, I wanted to talk about the second item actually on our three items for the crazy climate news of the week are the bad UK temperature stations. Now, this is a topic very near and dear to the heart of Anthony Watts, who almost alone in the world is drawing attention to the fact that the temperature stations, especially here, well, his focus was here in the United States, run hot, and they are not giving an accurate picture to the public, to the scientific community, and to the media of exactly how warm it is, or if it's getting warmer, and the data is just not reliable. And so actually, Anthony alerted us this week that there is the same thing going on over in the UK. And the headline here from an article in the Daily Skeptic says, "More horror pictures emerge showing locations of Met Office extreme record temperatures." And the article reads, "These days, the Met Office has rebadged its daily high temperatures as extreme. All the better, of course, to ramp up fears of heat as part of the net zero education process. Last Wednesday's extreme of 20.4 degrees Celsius was recorded at Teddington Bushy Park. As the Google Earth photo below shows, the extreme temperature is helped on its way by an adjacent high wall, reflecting heat onto the measuring device and a large housing development warming the area nearby. Teddington Bushy Park is a junk class 4 station with internationally recognized uncertainties of 2 degrees Celsius. Now, under a classification system set by the World Meteorological Organization that takes into account of temperature corruptions, natural and unnatural, 77.9% of Met Office sites are rated class 4 and 5 and have uncertainties of between 2 degrees Celsius and 5 degrees Celsius respectively. And earlier this year, a Freedom of Information request from the Daily Skeptic finally revealed what has been suspected for a long time, namely that the Met Office temperature measuring system is not fit for the purpose of providing accurate measurements of temperature either at a specific local site or a national or even global average scale. Now, Anthony, again, this is your specialty. You've produced 2 reports on the junk temperature stations here in the United States. The last one was in 2022 that showed 96% of NOAA's official temperature stations are corrupted in similar ways that we just saw in the UK, that they run too hot and they distort the reality of our temperatures and trend.
Yeah, well, when I presented this data in 2022, after the first time we did it in 2008, the response was, well, they sicked the fact checkers on me, and so they had a fact checker like from Polyfact, for example. Is this gal who's just out of college with no science experience whatsoever? I think she was a journalism / political science major with a / he, she, her, whatever at the end of her title. And, she asked a couple of people, well, what about this? And they say, oh, well, he's full of, whatever. And it's not a big deal. Right. So they did not look at the actual data. They just looked at opinions from other people. And of course, that's how they fact check things. Well, the bottom line is that everything that I did is factual and it is reproducible. And you can go out and look at these stations yourself, and you can see that the 100-foot rule has been violated. And it's not just a few stations, as the National Weather Service and NOAA and NCEI would have you believe. It's hundreds, if not thousands of stations that have this problem in the United States. And as we're seeing now, the world. But here's the thing. They claim that they can statistically adjust out this problem. We compensate for it, right? You can't. When you've got such a majority of bias, like I have discovered with these stations, you can't simply adjust it out. You can't compare it to another station over here and come up with an adjustment that makes it better. It's just not going to happen. So the bottom line is that there's few stations that I found, about 100 plus stations in the United States, that have not been corrupted by this bias, that are mostly significantly rural and haven't been changed over the last 30 years or so, show about half of the rate of warming of all the other stations. And it's very much in line with what Dr. Roy Spencer and Dr. John Christie have come up with their UAH satellite measurements. The same trend, very similar. So what this says is that the surface network as it stands, not just in the United States, but also in the world, is not fit for purpose. And I will tell you, in fact, if somebody wanted to do a GoFundMe and have a wheel of countries, and spin that and have me go inspect weather stations, whatever the pointer lands, like Zimbabwe or whatever, I could go there and I could find stations that are the same problem. It's a worldwide problem.
Yeah. And and we're still working on, I know that the work you've done on these temperature stations, I think your first report was back in 2009, and there it is on the screen. Thank you, Andy. With the corrupted climate stations, the 2022 edition. It's a wonderful report. You can find that at heartland.org. Just type in corrupted climate stations in the search bar and you can come up with that. It's full of, you took infrared photographs so that you could prove to see that these stations are located like on stone walls or near an air conditioning unit. I mean, it's basically, and as you take the picture, you can see that station is in literally the hottest place it could possibly be in the area that it's measured.
I mean, there they are. There's some of the infrared photographs. I mean, here's one in a parking lot, that little white stick you see on the right side picture, that's the temperature sensor. Yeah. It's up near the roof. They actually made it higher than usual for some reason. And so it's right next to a hot roof. Gosh, that's a perfect place to measure climate, don't you think? But the worst one I found was, here's one in Arco, Idaho, a rural place, and it's corrupted because it's right next to a wall that gets sunlight. But the worst one I found was in Colfax, California. And this was at a station, a fire station. There it is, right there. That one. Yes. Nope, not that one. That one. There it is. That rock wall, and then you can see circled the temperature sensor, didn't exist about 5 years ago. Prior to this, the temperature sensor was in the middle of a field surrounded by pine trees. It was away from any kind of influence, and it was okay. But then the fire station got rebuilt, and they put up this rock retaining wall, and they put the temperature sensor right at the top of the retaining wall. And then here it is in midday sun, and you look at how hot that retaining wall is getting from the sunlight. And of course, it releases that heat at night. It biases the nighttime temperature up, and since the average temperature is used to determine global warming, that average goes up, and therefore it's climate change. Ta-da!
I helped gather some of the photographs. I went out and researched some of these stations. First off, Anthony, I do disagree with you on one thing. I think the worst. I think the worst one was the one in Idaho, like you say, a rural location. And where do they place it? Next to a popular hot springs where they had developed.
It's like, yes, the one in the hot springs.
It's squeezed between the parking lot, the sidewalk, and a wall next to the steam rising up from a hot springs.
There it is. Yeah, there it is right there. This is Lava Hot Springs, Idaho. This is a resort. It's a water slide, water park kind of thing, because they've got nice warm water coming up out of the ground. And there's the temperature sensor next to the electrical panels in the hole, down in the hole where the water comes out of, the heated water from the earth. What a great place to measure climate change, right?
That's but when I went out and took these photographs, what shocked me is I went to 5 different locations around North and East Texas, and 4 of the 5 were awful. The only one that met NOAA standards or NWS standards was actually in an urban area. It was in Richardson, Texas, but it was more than 30 yards away from the nearest building. It was in a flat, grassy area with no trees or anything blocking it. But then I went to Joe Pool Lake, which is a fairly rural area. There's a park. You could have put it anywhere in the park. Where do they put it? It's right next to it's on the concrete pad next to the ranger station. So you got heat coming off the concrete. You got heat coming off the wall from the ranger station. They could have placed it anywhere, even 30 yards away from where it was, and it would have been okay. But no, where it was in relatively rural East Texas, I traced. Oh, okay. Here's the location of this station.
Yeah,
a big area. One radio station. So it's a radio station. Here's the brick building, and there are 100, 200 yards around the building, nothing. Where's the weather station located? Right up next to the wall of the building.
Yeah. Well, hey, Anthony told me before the show came on today that he has kind of a hard out right at the top of the hour, and I know that sometimes we run a little long, and I have a feeling this might run a bit long. So there are some questions actually related to this issue and this topic that are for Anthony that I wanted to just get out right now.
Yeah.
Linnea, if you wanted to grab those.
Sure. So we've got one question from Chris Nisbet, who's a regular viewer of ours that I think is important for us to address pretty quick here. And that's, can Anthony talk about the homogenization of measurements a little bit? Like what are they saying when they say, that they can homogenize the data in order to make it so that the urban heat island effect isn't affecting the temperature record as much? It's obviously nonsense, but it might not be obvious to everyone. So if you can expand on that a bit, I think it would help.
Okay, so let's think about making milkshakes, all right, in a blender. Now, the blender is the homogenizer, right? And so you want to make a milkshake, but you want to make it accurately, right? To recipe or whatever. So you make a milkshake that is exactly to the vanilla recipe. But then you realize for some reason, the ingredients that you've put in are not vanilla, right? So we've got some cayenne pepper and some Tabasco sauce and some chili peppers and some other things that somehow make their way into this vanilla milkshake into the blender. So all of a sudden, this bland vanilla milkshake, when you throw these other ingredients, hot ingredients in, no longer tastes like a vanilla milkshake. It's tangy, it's hot, it's spicy. Now, imagine, if you will, after this homogenization process has been done, did this milkshake adhere to the recipe? No. You end up with this spicy hot milkshake when you intended to get a vanilla milkshake, because it's all blended together using the homogenizer, right? And so that's the problem with this. There is if there were just a few stations that were corrupted, and you ended up with, a couple of flakes of hot pepper in it in the milkshake. You wouldn't taste it. It wouldn't be affected. But because the majority of the ingredients are biased hot, you end up with a hot milkshake when you really wanted a vanilla milkshake. I hope that makes sense.
I mean, yeah, no, I think what they do is they try and average across stations. So they take
pairwise comparison.
Here's a bad station, and they go to the nearest stations. Well, if they're all bad, if they're all bad, then you don't solve the problem. And if what they do instead is they go to a rural station, the nearest rural station, then they just corrupt its data because they want to homogenize that as well. And that's like pouring bottled water into a dirty puddle and thinking it's going to clean it up.
You almost killed him, Sterling.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right. A
I'm
couple more questions.
Coffee, and this is the first time I've ever done this on camera. I'm drinking coffee, and Sterling said something funny, and I blew coffee all over my screen.
Okay.
All right.
We've got okay, let's see. This one from Montana Blues also has to do with this. And this is Anthony's weather station available for purchase yet?
No, it's not. And let's not talk about that. That's a whole separate project.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Yeah, everyone wants to know how your weather station project is going, Anthony.
Well,
it's another time. Let's
let's deal with that another time.
Okay.
All right.
Fair enough.
Okay. All righty.
One last one, just right here, I think relevant to there. Is there a map with the European temperature stations? Do we know if there is?
Yeah, there is. You can go to historical observation meta database, something that NOAA runs called HOMR. So you can search on Google, capital HOMR and then NOAA, and then it will bring up this website that's got a database of all the weather stations. Unfortunately, most of the European weather stations have very coarse latitude, longitude measurements, and so it makes them hard to find. But if you're persistent, you can find them.
Excellent. Okay. All right. We're going to move on to what was supposed to be the first item here on the rundown on the left, and that is, that EVs were in the eye of Hurricane Helene this week. And I came across a video that I just thought was, well, I guess unintentionally hilarious, but it's just kind of crazy. So this is a clip of Florida's CFO and state fire marshal urging residents to get their electric vehicles, their e-bikes, their e-scooters, all of it to higher ground before Hurricane Helene hit. And so, I don't know, this just struck me as almost cognitive dissonance. So let's, Andy, if you want to go ahead and play that video.
Hi, this is CFO and State Fire Marshal Jimmy Petronas. As this tropical cyclone threatens the state of Florida, we need all Floridians to take this storm seriously. If you have an EV, an e-bike, a scooter, something that is powered by a lithium-ion battery, you need to take it to higher ground. Storm surge can compromise these batteries and lead to fires. With your EV, the smart app that's attached to it, you will get a push notification from the EV manufacturer with guidance and advice on best practices, how to make sure you keep your EV, your family, and yourself safe. Do not wait till the storm makes landfall to move any of these items. Now's the time to make the preparations and take the storm seriously. Please visit preparefl.com for more storm prep and resources. Stay safe, Florida.
Well, that's brilliant. Evacuate the EV first. Let's not worry about the people.
Right. Well, I mean, so not only does an EV owner have to worry about the power going out, not being able to charge after their EV after the storm. Now they make sure that they evacuate it to higher ground. If you live in the panhandle of Florida, higher ground is a long drive, and I don't even know if you'd have enough charge to make it there. Or I suppose higher ground could also include elevated garages, right? With lots of stories. Are those things designed to handle hundreds and hundreds of electric vehicles in them that are way heavier than a conventional vehicle? And I actually looked up the stats to talk about this. Florida is second in the country in registered electric vehicles, second only to California. There's a little bit more than 254,000. There it is, 254,878. This is as of December 2023, the latest data available. Registered electric vehicles in Florida. I mean, the entire state pretty much is a floodplain. The highest point in Florida is like 300 feet. And I think it's actually near the panhandle, but still. Linnea, you live in a hurricane zone. I get the feeling sometimes that our betters in government and society who are pushing that we will only be able to drive EVs in the next 10 or 15 years, maybe even less than that, haven't really thought all of this through. And I think increasingly it's going to be start putting people and emergency responders in grave danger because, as we've seen in the past, an electric vehicle can continue to burn underwater.
Yeah,
well, I
that's
suppose,
terrible.
I mean, what you have to hope for is that they improve the I don't know what you would call it, like the shielding underneath the vehicle, because that's, where the water incursion is going to come from. Yeah, you do not want water coming into contact with lithium. It's yeah, I mean, I live somewhere where, you have to take a bridge to get onto, the island. And we've already seen that some bridge infrastructure is struggling to handle the increased average weight of cars going over them. This is a engineering problem on all sides. I don't think it's impossible that they could make electric vehicles that don't spontaneously combust. But it appears that we're not quite there yet. So I would say we should use some caution here and maybe not the government pushing this stuff so aggressively is part of the major problem here, I think. And practically mandating is much of the problem, especially when the technology doesn't seem like it's all the way there in all cases.
Any other technology with this problem would have been pulled from the market. The government would have demanded the manufacturer pull it from the market. The Consumer Product Safety Commission would have required it to be pulled from the market, but not EVs, because it's part of their goal, their climate program. They don't care about people's safety. They care about preventing a modest rise in temperature. And I got to tell you, Jim, that the statistic, the graphic that you showed, that shocks me after their experience with the last hurricane, where cars caught fire and had to be. You can't resell these things, by the way. You can't resell them after they've been storm damaged, especially after they've caught fire. You can't afford to replace the batteries. So it is amazing to me that sales are so high in Florida.
Yeah, I mean that's from the Department of Energy. I thought, it'd be helpful to look that up to see how many electric vehicles are going to have to try to get out of harm's way. And 254,000, and it's second most in the country. Well, that's insane. But there it is.
Yeah, I want to point out to Slartibart Fast here that this technology actually does exist. You can, if you live in, like a hurricane-prone area, you actually can buy these like bags that you can drive your car into and seal them up behind the car. You guys laugh, cool. But that's for real. You can. It's like a big storage bag.
I believe you. The fact that they have to create a technology like that is just.
Well, if you have like a hobby car,
my suspicion is that's a single-use plastic bag, so it would be banned in California.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
Even if a simple little plastic bag isn't going to solve the problem, because one puncture and the water gets in, right? Or they didn't make it right at the manufacturer. But any EV battery that you get in water, the lithium in water just does not mix. So we got a video here that shows what happens when you take a lithium battery, just a plain old AA rechargeable lithium battery, and toss it into water. It's quite telling the kind of reaction you get when you see that happening.
Hey guys, I'm Nate. Welcome back to the King of Random. Today we're going to be trying out something a little bit different in that this whole video is going to be one take. We're going to show you an experiment from start to finish without cutting the camera to several different angles. We wanted to try this because it gives you a better sense of what it's like to really do an experiment in try, because put a little entirely different inside.
There you go, right there. Hey. Plain old lithium battery that you can buy at
Just
the
a piece of
drugstore,
plastic
right?
sheeting around the outside. There we go. This little top piece pops right off. Negative ends of the battery. Let's see if we can pull this whole roll out. Just edit right out of the videos because it's not very exciting to watch. But as I said, the point is to really see what it's like to
the chase
off as I unroll
All
it.
right.
Here I've it, and then we're going to react. Lithium in a bowl of water. Boom!
Hey,
Pink flame and orange flame and lots of smoke.
and that's a little battery.
That's a little battery. Yep.
That's the
Beautiful. That reacted so quickly too.
That's a little battery in water. In water.
And then it
Right.
That
popped.
they use to put out fires.
Wow.
Right.
I think
that's
that actually
right.
started
So
to
it
melt.
doesn't. So it's not going to work. So yeah. Thanks for grabbing that, Anthony, and thank you, Andy, producer extraordinaire, for being able to work that on the fly. But yeah, EVs and water do not mix. EVs and hurricanes are the worst marriage since Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez. And so I think they, as you said, Anthony, they would be. There needs to be a divorce, and it should be a mean one. But we don't run the world. We just comment on it. All right. Last item here for our crazy climate news of the week is one of your favorites topics that you write about a lot at our website, climaterealism.com. And this is a story from the Los Angeles Times that coffee prices are rising. Wake up and smell the climate change. Rising temperatures, prolonged summers and droughts, courtesy of climate change, have crippled crop production of many of the world's top coffee producing nations. From there, and you know the drill, high demand, low supply, higher costs. Doesn't really matter what your politics are. Record heat has an undeniable impact on agriculture and the global supply chain. Vietnam, for example, this author says, produces the most of the beans used for espresso and instant coffee in the world. This year, farmers spent parts of what is normally Vietnam's rainy season trying to save their crops from the worst drought in a decade. Anyway, the economics of coffee are changing alongside the weather. Now, Sterling, you do write about this a lot. I know we've had stories at probably a half dozen of at least stories at climaterealism.com on the myth that climate change is making coffee more rare, more expensive. So have a sip of your coffee and hit it.
Exactly. Here I am.
Very expensive.
They used to say, smoke it while you got it. I guess drink it while you got it. I don't know how they get away with publishing this stuff year after year. It's the same story. They publish allergies are getting worse, longer allergy season. Coffee's getting worse. It's going to go disappear. Prices are up. Look, the story itself said the worst drought they've had in a decade. Well, so there were droughts like it previously, and previous to that, and previous to that. Nothing to do with climate change. In fact, data shows droughts aren't getting worse. So how is climate change making drought worse if it's not getting worse? Coffee. Well, okay, what's going on with coffee? It turns out that you're getting, just like with almost every other crop you can look at, amidst climate change, yields and production are increasing, not decreasing, not running into shortfalls. There may be a lot of reasons for higher prices. One of those is these things are transported long distances. Coming from Vietnam to the Starbucks near you is a long way. And you know what fuel prices have done under the Biden-Harris administration? Gone way up. Do you know what fertilizer prices have done under the Biden administration? Gone way up. So look, there are reasons for higher prices that have nothing whatsoever to do with declining production or yields of coffee, because they're not declining. There's not increases in rainy, foul weather worsening. There's not increases in drought either that would affect coffee. Different regions suffer different weather events in different years, so they have ups and downs. But guess what? That's agriculture. That's happened throughout the entirety of history since we had the original agricultural revolution 10 to 12,000 years ago. Farmers were always looking to the skies, hoping the weather would be nice, and that year would be a good year for production. Sometimes it's not.
Yep.
All right. If you want to track the thing that we always go to here on Climate Realism, we always go to the data.
Yep.
No matter what the claim is, and when we go to the data, I tell you, it's like shooting fish in a barrel with these journalists. They just don't want to look at data because, math is hard, data is hard, right? And so they'll just go with how people feel about coffee, and so that's why we end up with these idiotic stories. But if you go look at the data, and I think we have it ready now, there's a graph from Statista that shows global coffee production, for the last 20 years or so. And it's just amazing.
Well, you go to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization has been tracking this stuff for decades, and coffee production is up, setting records almost with some regularity year over year.
Yeah, it's amazing. The graph keeps going up, and we end up with more coffee than ever because the demand keeps going up. But yet somehow climate change is making coffee more expensive or killing it or whatever, and it's just not true. Not true when you
it's not true, and it's propaganda, and it's designed. There you go. Well done, Anthony Singer, producer extraordinaire. There it is. Coffee bean production by region has gone up all the way across the board. The middle of that graph is 1990, when I started really drinking coffee a lot when I was early 20s. So, it's all propaganda. It's all designed to continue the narrative that everything you do in your life is threatened by climate change. Everything you do in life is making climate change worse. None of that is true. And it's just so relentless. You have to point it out sometimes because it's meant to demoralize you and frankly to make you dumb. This show I hope makes you smarter so you learn the truth about what's going on. All right. Thank you very much, guys. We have a couple of images here to show. We call them the memes of the week or the cartoons of the week. One of them here, Linnea shared this with us today. Maybe you could pull that full screen, Andy, because it's easier for the audience to see. There we go. It's a little bigger. So apparently the Washington Post has a new email newsletter or a new feature called Climate Coach. Down to earth advice for life on our changing planet. And on this one, it notes that Climate Coach says cows are the coal of food. Poor cows. I thought they were the natural gas of food, but what do I know, right?
All right. I didn't share this, but that's quite the headline there.
Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on Climate Coach, certainly being very bossy to let us know how we're supposed to live our lives for a sustainable planet.
Would that be true? Would that be true if they were white Angus as opposed to black Angus?
Oh no.
We're just going to move on to the next item I have here in the slideshow. And this is quick to the virtue signal. This is a special request from Sterling Burnett, but it thinks it's funny and it's nice. It's instead of the bat signal, we got the virtue signal.
That's in New York. That's in New York this week.
Yeah, that is in New York this week. It is the big virtue signal. Thousands of people doing it. And then just one last item. This is a graphic that Anthony Watts shared with us in our work Slack. And he said that this explains a lot. And it's a graph. Source was Langbert 2018. So this is a little old, but it says that most professors are Democrats. Therefore, all the experts that are cited in all the media you consume are all Democrats too. In the geoscience category, 96.43% of all professors, at least in 2018, were Democrats. In environmental science, 96.2%. Biology, 95.41%, physics, 86.11%. And I'm happy to report for the many wonderful engineers who have participated in Heartland's climate conferences over the years. And I know we have a lot of engineers watching this show today. Congratulations. Yours is the least ideological, stupid profession in college.
But with engineers have to get it right or people die.
Exactly.
And it's just that simple. All these other, things, they can get away with stuff. Geosciences, we were wrong about, tectonic plates or whatever. Nobody died. No worries.
It surprised me how many economists. It surprised me how many economists were liberals, because economists are supposed to understand supply and demand in markets, but I guess they've been steeped in neoliberal economics for too long, that they don't trust markets, or they just like to see themselves on TV, and so being conservative or being an accurate economist doesn't get you on TV.
Yeah. Well, they're all Keynesians, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Or
Keynesian,
Marxists.
neoliberal.
Straight up Marxist. Okay. All right. Now we're going to get to our main topic today, which is should be a lot of fun. And that it is now Climate Week in New York City. It's just wrapping up this week. And this is just a description of Climate Week in New York City from USA Today. They say it's somewhere between Davos and Burning Man, but for climate change. A sprawling event launched Sunday, runs for 7 days. Now in its 15th year, Climate Week includes over 600 events, seminars, workshops, and talks, in addition to plentiful protests. It's attended by a who's who of scientists, business leaders, and celebrities, of course. From Norway's foreign minister to Google's chief sustainability officer to Prince Harry himself. And so, when you see that stuff, I'm wondering, it's like, well, again, if you're really concerned about the environment, why are you flying in people from 100 countries and having 600 events, and when you could do it all online, right? But you don't get to eat Wagyu steak with celebrities and drink champagne via a Zoom call.
Sorry, but was that intro paragraph supposed to make it sound fun or good, or was it supposed to make it sound terribly cringe? Because
well, I read it because I think
somewhere between Davos and Burning Man.
Yeah, I know, right? That's actually I just had to read that. That's actually pretty great. Anyway,
look, it's the emissions from that. I'd like to see the net zero. How they got net zero for this conference, because they didn't.
Of course not.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. That does no. That's for us guys. That's not for them.
That doesn't apply.
Do all of this stuff. They get to throw soup on painting masterpieces, and they get to fly in the private jets anywhere they want for the sake of the environment. They actually have a website, of course, climateweeknyc.org, and believe it or not, this event has an opening ceremony. And their theme this year, guys, is It's Time, which highlights the urgent need for progress. To triple renewable capacity and double energy efficiency, we need to accelerate scalable innovation in energy storage, grid infrastructure, low carbon steel and concrete production. Good luck with that. And of course, in finance. At the opening ceremony, climate leaders will come together to discuss their plans and the steps taken to meet this moment and accelerate progress on global climate action goals. I had never heard of low carbon steel production. I don't think anybody has either. I think it's about as fantastical as a Disney film. I don't think you can produce steel in a low carbon manner. But again, I'm not an engineer. We got engineers in our audience. Maybe you guys can fill me in.
They use coking coal is what they use to make steel from iron.
So anyway, that's kind of setting the stage. But there's one news item out of here. There are actually several. I read a lot of stories about it. There was actually I don't have it in the show notes for you, Andy, but there was a letter or an op-ed written in a newspaper in Syracuse, New York, by a farmer, a dairy farmer, who was pushing back at the idea that, hey, don't come after my industry. I'm a sustainable farmer. And the guy actually even tried to join, some official capacity, the movement to make farming more sustainable and all that stuff. And he applied to join the group. They rejected him because he was not an organic farmer. And he explains in this op-ed piece that he felt bad that he was left out because he was not an organic farmer, and he was trying to explain that organic farming, he tried it, it doesn't give him the yield he needs to make a profit, and his profit margins are really small. So even those guys who try to do what they can, they get, if you're not 100% on board with these guys, you are dead to them. And that farmer, I feel for you, buddy, but maybe you should wake up. But
that's
anyway,
okay. Dairy farmers will soon be classified as coal miners, evidently. So,
yep. All right.
Cows are coal.
Yes. And we see that Linnea, you guys might have noticed that Linnea is gone. She's not gone. She just lost power in her house, which we discussed. It was hurricane related. So if it kicks back on, she'll be back. If not, she won't. I wanted to highlight at least one item here. I wanted to highlight at least one item here, and this really caught my eye. You mentioned net zero, Sterling, and it was from the Financial Post, and it says bankers say that they really think about. No, I'm sorry. Bankers say what they really think about net zero at Climate Week. And so, to me, this appears to be showing some cracks forming on the united front to get to net zero. People who live in the real world have to deal with real financial risks, not the trumped up fake climate risk, and are starting to realize, I think, little by little, that net zero is a loser. So the story begins on Wall Street. There's a new message making the rounds. It's one that says reaching net zero may be as difficult as, say, driving through Midtown Manhattan during the United Nations General Assembly, which is going on right now. And it says conversations at Climate Week have centered on huge challenges, such as what happens if financial institutions fail to meet their net zero promises. And more importantly, what if the world as a whole fails to attain the climate goals set by governments and business leaders? A woman named Heather Zeichel, head of sustainability at JP Morgan Chase and Company, she said the big question is when are they going to have a real conversation about how the Paris Agreement's goal of keeping temperatures from rising more than 1.5 degrees Celsius and how that's already out of reach. And she says, quote, I'm watching with bated breath a discussion around 1.5. Does that continue to be the target, or is there an evolution in thinking? And then she finishes up and if the goals change, quote, how does the public sector engage with the private sector in a conversation about what that means? I think it'll be more pivotal. It would be more pivotal than probably a lot of people are thinking in terms of what it does to drive the policy conversation. And then finally, one of the other quotes from the story, she said, it's hard to overstate how natural gas and our ability to access more of it has become a game changer. Sterling, this woman here has gone off the reservation. She seems to be having some realistic and math investment-based reality check on net zero and how this isn't attainable. And maybe somebody should also tell her that they pulled 1.5 degrees Celsius out of the air and it has no real meaning.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see if she still has a job.
Yeah.
In a couple of weeks. The last banker I know of that came out and said at a public forum and said, this climate stuff is claptrap, but it's damaging our bottom line. You can't reach the goals that you've set. He lost his job. He was actually a vice president in charge of corporate sustainability, and he said that, and he lost his job. So we'll see what happens to her. Banks. I saw an article, I believe it was in Fortune this week, that said 50% of banks could be destroyed by climate change. And it didn't mean they were all going to be wiped off the map by hurricanes. What it meant was they've invested in so much stuff that that it'll be stranded assets because of the damage from climate change, which of course is based on computer model projections that are wrong, not on real world data. And banks have dug their own, they've sort of dug their own hole here. For years, they've been talking about the need to invest in climate sustainability and net zero. We're going to go beyond, even if the US, when Trump was pulling out of Paris, they said, we're still going to commit to Paris's goals. And now they're saying, maybe they've got a few new CEOs. Now they're saying, hold it. We're supposed to be profitable. We're supposed to be taking care of people's pensions. We're tired of states telling us we can't do banking with them because we bought into fake climate goals and are trying to push it on our not just our investors, but people who hold accounts. We've been shutting down people's accounts, and now we're saying, well, maybe we want those people's accounts after all. So I won't say it's too little, too late, but I'm not crying too much over banks' sudden realization. It's sort of the John McClane welcome to the party, pal.
Yeah, fiduciary responsibility and climate change did not mix.
No, and the thing is, if everybody's basically conspiring together if all the big banks are conspiring together to make sure that you won't invest in fossil fuels, you won't invest in anything that the environmental left doesn't want you to invest in. If you are everybody has to be fully on board with ESG and all of that. But if somebody breaks ranks, the whole thing falls apart. And so when the head of sustainability investments at JP Morgan Chase, that's not a small bank, and that's not somebody with only a little bit of influence. When she's talking about how natural gas is a game changer, I find that encouraging, because it means I think a lot of the pretending and BS and as you said, Anthony, putting environmental fantasies and the climate cult ahead of fiduciary responsibility, that's a good thing, and that's what should be happening everywhere.
Yep. It's a strange world we live in. Welcome back, Linnea.
Yes.
I live.
Yes, she does live. Yes, power went out temporarily. So glad to have you back.
Yep, it's back.
All right. Well,
that Generac you have kicked in, right?
No, I wish I had a whole house generator. I would love to have that someday, maybe. That's the dream. But
someday. Well, if we ever get big oil money, Linnea, we'll be sure to get you.
Yeah, come on, Exxon. What are we doing? I need a whole house generator.
I would point out that in her former job as a
show for the oil
petroleum engineer, she is the only person at the Heartland Institute that has actually accepted big oil money.
That's right.
That's actually correct.
But it was before she got to Heartland, so it kind of doesn't count. But yeah.
And they certainly don't like me now. So
no,
I'm decently confident I'll never get a job at a major oil company again if I wanted to. So
right. Okay, we've covered so much on this show already, and I think it's time to go to Q&A. I know, again, Anthony has a heart out here pretty soon, so we'll see if we can get as many questions as we can. We have a few in the chat. If you have a question, go ahead and put it in the chat on either Rumble, X, or YouTube. And Linnea, take it away.
Sorry, playing catch up here for a second. Just making sure I'm not missing anything. I don't think so. All right. There's another question. Okay. Here we have from Chris. He says, Climate Week in New York, do they spend as much time mourning the loss of lower Manhattan to sea level rise as was predicted decades ago?
More of a joke than a question, I suppose, but it's pretty good. What's the name of that? There's a highway along.
Yeah, Hansen Highway. Hansen predicted it would be underwater.
Yeah, which highway was that again?
Yeah, and then when it didn't happen coming up on the predicted date, he goes back to the reporter and says, "You misquoted me. It was actually 40 years in the future, not 20." So move the goalpost.
Yeah.
Well, this question is related. This comes from Jim Moses, who I'm not sure I've seen in our chat before. So welcome, Jim, if you're new. He says, can you talk about why the NOAA sea level data shows no signal for an increase in the rate of sea level rise, while the NASA graphs do show a rate of rise increase?
Yeah, when he's talking about NOAA data, I think he's talking about the tide gauge data. And if you go and actually look at real measurements from tide gauges, actually in the water measuring things, you don't see an acceleration. But if you look at the satellite data, which we have since around 1993 or so, the Jason 1, the Jason 2 type satellites, and you stitch all these 4 different satellite data sets together, you see an acceleration. Why? Well, as we proved some years ago on What's Up With That, that's also at Climate at a Glance about sea level data. When you stitch these different satellite measurement data sets together, you end up with an acceleration, a slight one. And it's because there's different sensors and different measurement methods. And it's just simply an artifact of the fact that you've got 4 different data sets, in this thing. And that's all it is.
Sorry, my dog is barking now, so I'm trying not to. Okay, I'll answer this one from Stevie, who asks, is it possible that the extreme weather is because of geoengineering? And my answer to that would be, one, if you're talking about hurricanes, no, because there's no technology on Earth that could create a hurricane. The energy involved is just unbelievable. You could not do that. And also, if there was geoengineering going on creating extreme weather, then you would expect there to be a trend of increasing extreme weather, and there isn't. So
I don't know.
I don't put a whole block into that.
I don't know, Linnea. I've seen some James Bond villains, and what was it, Michael Myers film with Dr. Evil? They were doing that kind of stuff. So if media is reality, maybe he's onto something.
Well, we almost got into this last week, I think, Anthony. The dumping, was it iron into the oceans to try to fix something wrong with them and all that kind of nonsense. And was it you that pointed out that the Earth is already doing that? It's called sand blowing off from the Sahara.
Yeah, that was on What's Up with That this week. I want to point out that there are some cases where accidental geoengineering has affected the weather. There was a study done, a couple of studies done of some Midwestern cities whereby there were some thunderstorms that developed downwind of the city heat island effect, and so that was something where we engineered something and it did affect the weather, but that was accidental, not intentional.
Right. You could say that the urban heat island effect itself is kind of geoengineering locally, right? Because, people always say that the city of Chicago itself, I don't know if this is true or not, but it rings true. I think, Anthony, you would probably know better than I do, that the existence of the city of Chicago on Lake Michigan, where it is, actually impacts some precipitation in that area.
There's a lot of geoengineering at the local and regional level. I worked with a scientist once who did a study of glaciers melting on some Mexican mountains. And what they found is the temperature at the top of the mountain had changed. That wasn't the cause, but farmers were farming higher up the mountains, and they used slash and burn agriculture there. So every time they burned a new timbered area or forest, the soot goes up in the air, lands on the glacier, and the temperatures melted. That's geoengineering. It's not intentional, but intentional geoengineering, to my knowledge, has not had any effect on climate.
Yeah.
No, not on major storm systems. I mean, like Chris Martz was on here a couple weeks ago, and he pointed out that, just planting, millions of acres of corn has an impact on the local weather because of the humidity increase that you get in those regions because of corn sweat. Right. Yeah. So yeah, there is an impact, but I don't think that there's reasonable evidence that like the government is making hurricanes, if that's what we're talking about when it comes to geoengineering. That's taking it a little bit too far. And that's what tends to happen with a lot of these things. There are real things, there are real geoengineering things that do exist, and then people tend to just kind of let it run away with them a little bit, and sometimes a lot of it. But it's important to ask those kinds of questions. So I don't hate getting them. All right, let's see. Here's another one from Chris. He says, are there many financial institutions that aren't infected with ESG and net zero nonsense?
Yeah, I would say, take my advice, find a local bank. Don't go with the big chain, Citibank and all of those, Bank of America, because they're all infected. Find a local bank that you can trust, where the people live where the bank is, that work in it, and those kinds of folks are not infected by this stuff. And a lot of them are so pragmatic, they won't even want to get involved. That's my best advice.
Yeah. And I think some of the larger financial institutions are starting to realize that, again, ESG only works if the entire system is rigged with very strict discipline, because that's the way to ensure that they all make money, right? You are starting to see some big financial institutions and other companies realize that ESG and DEI, to a lesser extent perhaps, are losers for them financially. That and you're starting to see cracks in that. Even Larry Fink said to the World Economic Forum not too long ago, I think it was in April of this year, that he's starting to be skeptical about getting to net zero. He understands that the AI revolution is going to take enormous amounts of energy, like exponentially more energy than we can produce right now, and that the intermittent sources of wind and solar that the whole world seems convinced is the future is not the future if you're going to have enough power for for AI and for everything else. So you're starting to see some cracks in the dam. I would hope that in 5 years from now, talking about ESG and investment will be just a kind of a laughing memory, and that we'll be back to normal.
I'll say this, Anthony's right. I certainly endorse banking with local banks and smaller banks, maybe credit unions. But The elites are even infecting that, because all of these banks in every state are represented by a state banking association, that do the lobbying for them. And in states where Heartland, I know, has worked to get ESG bills adopted, the state banking association has come in and fought against it, sometimes successfully. They're supposed to represent their members. Their members are conservative, nose to the grindstone bankers who care about local issues, but the people representing them don't represent them well on these issues.
Right. Thank you. Let's see. We don't have a whole lot of questions today. We have another one from Jim here who says, is that satellite data apparent increase in rate actually an instrument accuracy degradation error? I don't know what I just read. Sorry. Okay. That's he's asking about the sea level rise stuff, and he's saying, is the satellite data with regards to sea level rise an instrument accuracy degradation error? Like the instruments are getting bad as the satellites get old before they put a new satellite up?
Well, there's some of that going on. The instruments do degrade, and we're also talking about trying to measure, down to a millimeter from geostationary orbits and things like that, 23,500 miles up. I mean, the claims of accuracy are a little bit overblown in my view. But yeah, you just, tide gauge data tells the real story. The satellite data tells a different story, and that story is based on the problems associated with the measurements, as well as stitching together dissimilar measurement periods.
Yeah, and it was mentioned by one of our commenters that a picture of Battery Park in Lower Manhattan also tells the story. One from 1900 and one from 2024, and the sea level is in the same place. So.
Yeah, and sea level change is different. Relative sea level is different based on where you are. It's not uniform across the globe, and even genuine sea level rise from ice melt is not going to be uniform. Average sea level rise is an average. So you live in Louisiana or something, because of the land sinking there, sea level rise is going to appear to be much faster than places where it could even be lowering. Like there are some spots in the Pacific Northwest where the land is rising, so it appears that sea level is lowering. Okay, so this is actually a good question, because I think we take for granted that people know what we're talking about when we say ESG, and we do have a viewer who is not familiar with ESG. So someone wants to take that on.
That's environment, social, and governance principles applied to either your business or, in this case, into financial investments. So it's basically the left-wing environmental agenda imposed upon the private sector, in which you must think about the environmental impact of every bit of your business. You must be thinking about basically social justice when it comes to operating your business. So it's, again, like I said, it's imposing basically the leftist view of how society should be organized and imposing it upon the private sector, and in this case, especially the investment sector. And so they realized long ago that, just having governments are really good at compelling people to do things, but they're not always 100% successful. The only way they're ever going to achieve their leftist dreams is to ensure that the private sector is compelled. They will be the enforcement arm of the left's agenda. And that's what ESG is really all about.
Thank you very much, Jim. Anthony, where can we download the historical temperature data to archive station records?
Well, it's not easy for me to say. I can say it, but I can't translate it into a URL easily. But there's a website called NCEI, National Center for Environmental Information. It was formerly the National Climatic Data Center. If you look that up, they have all the data sets on there, not just for the United States, but for the world. They have it in raw and adjusted formats. So you can go there and download it and play with the data. It's you have to, search for it and query it, but you can find it.
Okay, and the question we're going to leave off on here, because we are running out of time, is a very important one, and that is, did everyone smash the thumbs up? So thank you so much to all of our viewers.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for being on the show today. Thank you, Linnea, for coming in and out as your power allowed to run us through this program. Again, as I said at the top, there is no other program like the Climate Realism Show. This is where you get the best information, countering the media narratives and lies about what is happening to our planet and why. and also where we can have a little bit of fun and you can participate in the show. So please hit that like button, share this video with your friends and family, leave a comment if you have more questions. We'd love to read the comments, and that all helps with the algorithm. Visit climaterealism.com, visit climateataglance.com, visit whatsupwiththat.com, and thank you again to our streaming partners, which is junkscience.com, CFACT, and What's Up With That. And Sterling Burnett is going to be mad at me if I do not remind you, go to heartland.org/subscribe and get the Heartland's Climate Change Weekly newsletter. It's fantastic. It goes out every Friday. Thank you all again for being on the show. Thank you, Linnea. Thank you, Andy, producer. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Sterling. And we will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Come on, man.